from global economic data to large-scale real-time payments and corporate asset strategies. Recently, the movements surrounding the XRP ledger have been anything but ordinary. The community was thrown into turmoil when the US government took the unprecedented step of putting GDP directly on the blockchain, but excluded the XRP ledger, and in response there have been signs that the XRP ledger network itself is moving to prove its own potential. Meanwhile, a South American bank has processed real-time FX payments worth $1 billion using an XRP ledger-based stablecoin, and a publicly listed Japanese gaming company has announced plans to purchase XRP worth several billion yen. In addition, macro investment giant Raoul Pal has assessed that XRP has now entered a full-fledged upward phase, the so-called full porting stage. On the surface, the XRP ledger seemed quiet, but let's take a closer look at how it is now becoming the undercurrent of global financial flows. Recently, for the first time ever, the US Department of Commerce simultaneously released GDP data on multiple public blockchains: Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, Tron, Stellar, Arbitrum, Polygon, Optimism. They uploaded the encrypted hash values and some figures of the US GDP to these 9 networks. This is being seen as an innovative attempt to record official government statistics on-chain, thereby increasing transparency and data security. In fact, the preliminary figures for the US GDP in July 2025 and economic indicators such as the PCE price index, which were released this time, can now be verified by anyone through the relevant blockchain. The US government emphasized the use of blockchain, stating that it is making the economic truth of the United States available to the world as an immutable record, and reported that major exchanges such as Coinbase, Gemini, and Kraken assisted in publishing the data. However, the fact that the XRP ledger was actually left out of this initial public release caused a major stir within the XRP community. Although the government claimed that it included multiple chains without favoritism, XRP supporters strongly questioned the exclusion of the XRP ledger, which ranks high in market capitalization and has strengths in international remittances. Some even speculated that the government might not trust the XRP ledger. While the intention to enhance transparency was generally welcomed, the fact that only the XRP ledger was excluded has greatly heightened interest within this community. As the community expressed disappointment and criticism over the exclusion of the XRP ledger, one of the XRP ledger validators even took direct action. An XRP validator named VET directly recorded the SHA-256 hash value from the official US GDP report onto the XRP ledger to prove that there was no issue on their end as well. He did something similar to what Bitcoin did by including the hash value in the transaction memo, and went a step further by creating an NFT that contained both the hash and a link to the original PDF, which he then issued on the XRP ledger. The entire process took only a few seconds and the fee was less than a cent. There was absolutely no need for complex features like smart contracts. In other words, this clearly demonstrated that the XRP ledger is more than capable of easily handling on-chain processing for things like government announcement data. So then, why did the government exclude the XRP ledger this time? Supporters of the XRP ledger, including VET, focused on technical reasons rather than conspiracy theories. This time, the US Department of Commerce distributed data on-chain through decentralized oracle networks called Chainlink and Pith, but the reason is that these oracles currently do not support the XRP ledger. In other words, it's more likely that XRP ledger was excluded due to practical issues, not because the government dislikes it. In fact, Validator VET also explained that there's no need to read too much into it. It's simply that the oracles used this time do not yet distribute data to the XRP ledger. Since the government has also announced that it may expand the supported chains and oracles in the future, there is a possibility that XRP ledger will soon join this flow of government data on-chain. What's important is that, through this recent incident, the XRP ledger community has proven the performance and scalability of their own network, making a strong impression of their presence. I think this is the key point. Meanwhile, in South America, specifically Brazil, XRP ledger is already playing a major and intense role on the real-world stage. Banco Bradesco is a commercial bank authorized by the Central Bank of Brazil, and it operates its own Brazilian real-pegged stablecoin, BBRL, on the XRP ledger. Amazingly, it is reported that in just the third quarter of 2025, they processed customer payments totaling $1 billion through this BBRL. It's not just for a day or two, but over an entire quarter, payments and settlements worth 1.3 trillion won were processed stably on the XRP ledger. This really highlights the XRP ledger's stature as a financial infrastructure. This news was brought to the industry's attention by Luke Jezis of Stake City, an XRP ledger infrastructure company. What's even more noteworthy is that in April of this year, Brazza Bank processed as much as $1.7 billion in transactions on the XRP ledger in just a single day. This was confirmed in official materials released by Ripple in May, and it was shared along with the news that Brazza Bank is further expanding its XRP ledger-based business and has also launched the USD-pegged stablecoin USDB. BBRL is an example of tokenizing the local currency, and the subsequently introduced USDB is a stablecoin pegged to the US dollar, backed by US and Brazilian government bonds. Both stablecoins are issued and operated on the XRP ledger, and Banco Bradesco uses them to provide companies with real-time international remittance and mass payment services that combine traditional finance with blockchain technology. In fact, Banco Bradesco has stated that thanks to the XRP ledger, they have secured a scalable platform that allows them to easily handle large-scale payment settlements. In July of this year, this bank further supported the increase in transaction volume by issuing an additional $4.2 million worth of BBRL, which demonstrates that the XRP ledger is emerging as one of the leading platforms being used for cross-border fund transfers and real-world asset settlements. Banco Bradesco is not stopping there and is even looking to issue a new stablecoin pegged to the euro. If the euro stablecoin joins in, BRL, EUR, and these three currencies will all circulate in real time on the XRP ledger, effectively creating a global multi-currency payment network of their own. This signals a revolution in the international remittance and foreign exchange markets. Banco Bradesco's actions are closely linked with Brazil's government-level CBDC project and participation in DREX, and the bank has expressed its ambition to lead this change, predicting that stablecoins will dominate the global FX market within the next 5 years. In fact, Marcelo Sacomori, CEO of Banco Bradesco, has publicly stated the goal that by 2026, their USDB will account for 30% of the dollar-pegged stablecoin market in Brazil. The challenge posed by private banks based on the XRP ledger is changing the landscape of the massive foreign exchange market, and it seems it's not just a feeling that this is something we can't help but pay close attention to. Interesting developments are also unfolding in Asia. A well-known Japanese game developer, Ken, has recently announced an unprecedented financial decision. They announced that they would purchase XRP coins worth 2.5 billion yen as part of the company's treasury. Moreover, instead of buying it all at once, their strategy is to make split purchases over 5 months, from September 2025 to February 2026. Ken is a developer well known for the mobile game Brave Frontier, and since being listed on the Tokyo Stock Exchange in 2014, it has continuously invested in the blockchain sector. The company emphasized that this decision is not simply a bet on the rising price of crypto assets. In its official statement, Ken explained that the recent XRP purchase is not for price speculation, but rather a strategic move to participate in the XRP ecosystem, which is the core of the international remittance liquidity network, and to directly connect this to profit opportunities in its own financial business. In short, this can be seen as a determination to enter the global payment network through XRP and create new sources of revenue. This move is also being regarded as an interesting change from a corporate finance perspective. The company's management has announced that they will build their blockchain business around 2 pillars, Bitcoin and XRP. They explained that Bitcoin serves as a store of value and a staking income asset, while XRP functions as an operational asset by connecting payment infrastructure and liquidity, each playing a different role. In fact, earlier this year, the company acquired Bitcoin worth 1 billion yen and used it for staking. In the second half of the year, they shifted their focus to XRP, creating an unusual crypto portfolio for a regular company rather than an exchange or financial firm. Japan is a market with relatively clear regulations, and since XRP is an asset backed by major local financial institutions like SBI Holdings, this company's decision could be seen as a signal for a new trend in crypto asset management among Japanese companies. Although the company's stock price experienced some adjustment after the announcement, attention is now focused on how investors will evaluate the company's blueprint for strengthening its blockchain business and expanding into the global payment network in the mid to long term. Now let's take a look at the outlook for XRP from renowned macro analyst Raoul Pal. Raoul Pal recently stated that XRP has entered the full porting stage. This is a somewhat unfamiliar term, but Raoul Pal has previously explained the crypto market by comparing it to a waiting room, where assets sit and wait for their turn. According to his analysis, Ethereum was the first to leave the waiting room, surging over 70% since July and reaching a new all-time high, and he believes Solana is next in line to follow. And now, XRP is also no longer sitting in the waiting chair, it is shifting into a full-on upward phase, which he refers to as entering a full port mode. In fact, after surging 35% in July and stretching its wings, XRP is currently experiencing a period of consolidation and correction in August. Coincidentally, since Bitcoin hit an all-time high of $124,000 and is now undergoing a correction due to profit-taking, this can be seen as a typical sign of an alt season, where investment funds rotate from Bitcoin into altcoins. Raoul Pal believes that, amid this capital rotation, XRP will be one of the main beneficiaries. He also draws strong conviction from the macro chart structure of XRP. Looking at the weekly XRP chart he presented, the cyclical patterns that have repeated since 2014 are quite clear. In the first cycle, XRP was trapped within a large descending triangle pattern for almost 3 years from 2014 to 2017, but managed to break out at the end of 2017 and peaked above $3.30 in January 2018. In the second cycle, after a prolonged decline, XRP formed a falling wedge pattern from 2018 to 2020, and after breaking out upward at the end of 2020, it rose to 1.96 in April 2021. From 2021 to 2024, which corresponds to the third cycle, XRP consolidated its strength within a broad descending triangle, and finally, in November 2024, it successfully broke out upward, quickly surpassing the $1, $2, and $3 barriers. And currently, the price of XRP is forming a small triangle consolidation just below $3, taking a breather after the rally at the end of 2024. Raoul Pal analyzes the latest chart adjustment as this pennant pattern, explaining that since such flag patterns are typically seen as signals of trend continuation, it is highly likely that XRP will carry on the momentum from its previous rise. What Raoul Pal refers to as full porting, in other words, the phase where the engine is running at full throttle, will only be confirmed if XRP breaks through the top of this triangle pattern and begins this additional upward movement. If it succeeds in breaking through, XRP will enter a full-fledged long-term upward cycle. On the other hand, if the current correction pattern breaks down, he added that XRP could test support at $1.7 to $2. Ultimately, the XRP chart is now at a critical turning point, and it appears that Raoul Pal is betting on the upside based on strong historical patterns and the current market narrative. The 5 trends we've looked at so far may each seem like separate pieces of news on the surface, but within the bigger picture, they converge into a single context. First, the incident where the XRP ledger was omitted from the US government's GDP on-chain announcement ironically became an opportunity for the XRP ledger community to showcase its technical capabilities to the world. While the practical limitation of decentralized Oracle infrastructure was also revealed, at the same time, it can be seen as proof that the XRP ledger is a mature blockchain capable of handling even government-level data with ease. This suggests the possibility that, going forward, the XRP ledger could be fully incorporated into global public data or institutional use cases. The case of the Brazilian bank demonstrates that the XRP ledger is already functioning as an infrastructure that moves significant value at the stage of real-world use. The sight of settling $1 billion a day and tokenizing national currency for international payments can be seen as Ripple's vision being realized through private sector initiatives. This shows that the value foundation of XRP is becoming directly linked not to mere speculation or expectations, but to real-world payment demand. In particular, the fact that Banco do Brasil is preparing to expand into the Eurozone and that a multi-currency ecosystem is beginning to form on the XRP ledger suggests that the demand base for XRP could expand beyond regions to a global scale. Also, the decision by the Japanese company Gomi is significant in that it represents the adoption of XRP at the corporate level. Traditionally, while there have been cases where companies held Bitcoin as a treasury asset, it is quite unusual to see a move to hold a large amount of an altcoin like XRP for the long term. Gomi regards XRP as a key reserve currency for international remittance networks and is actively seeking to utilize it. This shows that XRP is starting to gain attention not just as a simple payment token, but also as a strategic asset for corporate business, and it could trigger similar moves by other companies. Macro investor Raoul Pal's analysis is being interpreted as a signal that both the market narrative and technical structure are developing favorably for XRP. Historically, the fact that XRP has repeatedly experienced explosive rallies in multi-year cycles and that right now could be the threshold for entering the next super cycle is a very compelling story for investors. In particular, the expectation that XRP will play a key role in the cyclical flow of funds, where capital rotates from Bitcoin to altcoins in a kind of financial pulse, is something that can further heighten investor sentiment toward XRP. So I think all these trends can be summed up in a single conclusion. XRP Ledger and XRP, as of 2025, are emerging at the center of the global stage, having achieved a well-balanced combination of technology, real-world use, and capital markets. It demonstrates all of these: technological capability and community independent of government support, the reliability and efficiency trusted by actual financial institutions, future potential strong enough for global companies to hold long-term, and a market narrative compelling enough to attract macro investors. Of course, there are always risks involved in investing, and XRP is not without variables such as regulations, but the accumulation of visible fundamentals and adoption cases marks a phase that is clearly different from the past. From an investor's perspective, this is precisely why attention should be paid to the XRP ledger. Just as the saying goes, the time has quietly ripened. Various trends are converging toward a re-evaluation of XRP's value, and perhaps we are witnessing a turning point in the XRP ecosystem together. I hope you can take these various updates into account and maintain a wise and strategic investment stance.